very warm welcome to Addis News Hour. I'm Solomon Danye. Thanks for joining me. President Saleh Zewde has addressed the opening of the second United Nations Sustainable Transport Conference held in Beijing on Thursday. She said that road infrastructure is the backbone of Ethiopia's agricultural economy, and the nation has allocated 11% of its annual budget on road infrastructure development and maintenance. She expressed hope that the conference would focus on landlocked countries like Ethiopia in order to facilitate the movement of people and goods both in small rural towns and big urban centers like Addis Ababa. The provision of light rail and rapid transit systems is crucial for sustainable development, according to Office of the President. The 39th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union has kicked off in Addis Ababa on Thursday. The Council deliberates on different agendas, including the continent's response to COVID-19. Demus Mokra has attended the event and filed the following report.
After almost 2 years of wait due to coronavirus crisis, several African ministers of foreign affairs met in Addis just in person for the 39th AU Executive Council meeting. Opening the Council's meeting, African Union Commission Commissioner Musa Faki Mohammed welcomes participants, remembering all the COVID ravaged during the past 2 years in Africa and beyond.
Monsieur le Président du Conseil exécutif, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du Conseil exécutif,
the Commissioner highlighted key areas of deliberations and presented some of the crucial priorities of engagements to the Council.
qui est inscrit à votre ordre du jour.
In your agenda, you will find a report on the operationalization of the Africa CDC as an item on your agenda. The efforts and the various impacts of COVID-19, in fact, worsens famine, poverty, and malnutrition on the continent. In anticipation, our leaders have thought of dealing with the issue of nutrition and food security, which will be the theme for 2022.
Chair of the 39th Ordinary Session of the African Union Executive Council, Democratic Republic of Congo Foreign Minister Christophe Lutundula praises South African President for his contribution to the African continent to acquire COVID vaccines from the global pool. The minister stressed COVID-19 has severely affected African countries and called on more efforts to make the vaccine accessible to the wide majority of the African people.
Le président Cyril Ramaphosa de la République du Sud,
President of the Republic of South Africa, champion of the African Union, of the continent's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. President Ramaphosa, to whom we want to say thank you for his tireless effort and the crucial role that he has played in the process of the continent's acquisition of vaccines, and also championing the cause of the continent to manufacture vaccines so that we, the African people, can have access to vaccines.
The 39th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council is considering the draft agenda, draft decisions and declarations with appropriate recommendations for consideration by the heads of state and government in the coming few days.
The 39th Ordinary Session of Executive Council of Foreign Ministers of African countries has kicked off on Thursday at the headquarters in Addis Ababa. The meeting is being held physically for the first time after the outbreak of COVID-19. Strict COVID-19 guidelines are therefore expected to be placed during the event. ETV approached the spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia, Dina Mufti, who expressed his hope that the event will stimulate the COVID-hit tourism sector in Addis Ababa, the political capital of Africa.
This meeting is not virtual, it's going to be both hybrid and physical. And this is a sign of the opening. particularly for Addis, the city that is acquainted, that is accustomed with hosting the African Union, both the summit and the Council of Ministers, is really a big-time deal. It is a new beginning. It is a sign of reopening as well after COVID, and it's stimula. It stimulates the whole society, and it's quite encouraging phenomenon.
Dina also said the Executive Council will hear various regional issues, including the 42nd reports of the Permanent Committee.
The Council of Ministers will deliberate with various issues, of which one will be considering the report of the 42nd Permanent Committee, considering also the organization of the African CDC, considering also the agenda of the TEMA for 2022, which is nutrition and food security for Africa. On top of this, there will be also elections for various positions, of which 2 commissioners for the African Union. There will be also an election of the president and vice president of the African Pan-African University. There will be also election of 4 members of the African Peoples and Human Rights Commissions. Therefore, there will be also other agendas that will be dealing with the assessment of the contributions of the member nations. Last but not least, the Council of Ministers also will be dealing with the reports on the regional economic commissions, like one of them is IGAD and others.
I'm now joined here by my colleague Habtamu Ashagri, who is going to update us about the training issues in the past 24 hours. Thank you for having you, Habtam.
Thank you very much, sir.
So what are the top issues that have been making headlines in the past 24 hours?
Yeah, the top issues of in the past 24 hours is about the launching of the 39th African Union Commission Executive Council meeting that was kicked yesterday here in Addis Ababa. And the Executive Council discussed on the COVID-19 pandemic and its negative impact in the continent. As you know, Solomon, there are a lot of people in Africa that are being died by this pandemic, and what is those negative impact affected by those countries, this pandemic, and what are those measures taken by those African countries. And these are the main issues that they have discussed on Saturday, and they have also discussed on those agendas to prepare the head of state that was expected to be begin day after tomorrow. And these agendas are very critical to the continent, and the head of state is expected to pass a lot of decisions, either political decision and economic decision, to go forward the continent and African countries to challenge those problems.
And what other issue?
The other issue is about an article that was written by News Now Ethiopia by Mamo ምህረቱ, who is a Prime Minister advisor and Chief of Trade Negotiator. And that article showed that the plan that was exercised by the US government to eliminate Ethiopia from AGOA, African Growth Opportunity Act, and this decision, how was passed by, and what the impact of this decision made by the US, and what the problem of that decision affected Ethiopia. And on the article, there are a lot of issues are mentioned. The first one is about if the US government passing this decision, it affects those layman persons who are not connected with the conflict between the PLF and the federal government. I know that a lot of people are working in this opportunity, and if this opportunity is once closed, these people are affected by seriously. The number is 1 million. 1 million low-income Ethiopians are affected by this decision, and it also violates the law that was approved by Bill Clinton in 2000. This law protocol said that US is, without any intervention, wants to bring trade ties with African countries. If they are violate this decision, this law is also orchestrated by some problems still. And also the US government is promoting these market-based economies, and the US government puts directions to those African countries to exercise this kind of policy. If they are violating this concern, this is also under question. And the other point that was mentioned by the article is if the TPLF government is governing Ethiopia over the past 30 years, the US government is not raised such kind of concerns. Why they are concerning after the Abiy's administration after 2018? This is an impartiality problem. So the US government needs to concentrate and rethinking about this kind of decision.
Habtam Ashagri, thanks for your information. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gondar, a city of palaces and castles.
Now in the palace of Emperor Fasilides. Let's go inside and see what it's like. It has a unique Nubian structure and it was registered on the UNESCO Heritage Sites in 1979. Gondar, Gondar. This statue was made to commemorate the beloved Emperor Theodorus on January 18th of 2012.
We're here to see some castles. World Heritage Site.
Welcome back. You're watching Addis News Hour. Though it is yet to clean its own mess caused by the unexpected exit from Afghanistan, the Biden administration seems to be determined to find a way to attack Ethiopia. From lobbying governments to deleting international organizations, Biden's administration left no stone unturned to turn the world against the East African nation. Biden's scheduled meeting with Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, which is the first in-person one-on-one meeting with an African leader since taking office, signals that the U.S. is desperate to convince African leaders to back their doomed plans against Ethiopia. We have more on this story. The entire history of the U.S. mission to other countries to bring peace and stability proved to be nothing but failure. From Korea to Vietnam and Kosovo to Syria and Libya, what the entire world witnessed was destruction and sorrow. But still the U.S. acts as the guardian of world's peace. Many who truly understand the nature of its policy agree on the fact that the U.S. does not care about people. It even gambles on the lives of innocent civilians, including children, to keep its interest. The world vividly watched what it did in Syria. That's what its entire history told the whole world. Former U.S. President George W. Bush admitted that the U.S. intervention in Afghanistan and Iraq was a mistake.
I've just returned from Baghdad, and It was a terrible mistake.
His successor, Barack Obama, followed suit and admitted that Libya was his worst mistake.
Probably failing to plan for the day after what I think was the right thing to do in intervening in Libya.
And the Biden administration seems to be preparing itself to make its own mistake in Ethiopia. A few weeks after signing an executive order to pause sanctions on Ethiopia, the Biden administration intensified high-level ministerial meetings, engaging world leaders and aid organizations for a potential intervention in Ethiopia. USAID Administrator Samantha Power, U.S. Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa Jeffrey Feltman, and other high U.S. officials on Wednesday held high-level ministerial meetings with leaders of G7 on the issue of the Tigray crisis. In a statement the administrator issued after the talks, she indicated that the U.S. will find different approaches to deal with the humanitarian crisis in Ethiopia, which they have long been using as a tagline to intimidate the Ethiopian government. The Ethiopian government has also been condemned during the meeting for expelling 7 UN humanitarian workers whom the government accused of overplayed their roles as aid workers. This clearly indicates that the US and its allies are trying to express their indignation through what they call it a different approach under the guise of humanitarian crisis. Desperate to convince African leaders whose countries repeatedly refused to cooperate with its unilateral decisions against Ethiopia, the US has now started to invite African leaders like the Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta to the White House so that they could do their best. The scheduled meeting between Uhuru Kenyatta and Joe Biden, which is the first in-person one-on-one meeting with an African leader since taking office, is supposed to focus on the crisis in Ethiopia. Biden, who does not seem interested to talk directly with Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, is trying to discuss the issue of Ethiopia with other African leaders, thereby turning them against East African nation. Kenya holds the presidency of the UN Security Council for the month of October. It is to be recalled that Kenya supported Ethiopia's stance the whole way through the Council's deliberations. Kenyatta arrived in New York on Sunday to chair a debate in the Council. Biden's invitation to Uhuru for talks in the White House can be considered as a desperate attempt to convince Kenya to back US's recent policy towards Ethiopia. Though no one knows what the future holds, the moves of the US clearly indicates that it's up to something serious. African governments are urged for further commitments to independently undertaking their domestic agendas in a way that resists external pressures and foreign meddling. Exclusively talking to ETV English, African regional campaigner Charity Mugui has emphasized the significance of boosting renewable energy, making African countries self-resilient and environmentally friendly. Alola Teklamaram reports.
350.org is an international environmental organization addressing the climate crisis. Its stated goal is to end the use of fossil fuels and transition to renewable energy by building a global grassroots movement. African regional campaigner of the organization Charity Mugui thus urged African governments for further commitments to independently undertake their domestic agendas and cement Pan-African spirit in a way that resists external pressures.
What African governments can do in the Pan-African spirit is, one thing is that most of them have already committed to the nationally determined contributions, and a fraction of that is usually purely on their own contribution and not reliance on support from the developed countries. So what they can do is already start working on implementation or plans to achieving the commitments that they have already made and the NDCs.
Charity further expressed the need to circumvent financial dependency from external donors if Africa wants to be politically independent.
So the ongoing political, colonialism or control is usually has underlying statements to financial dependence or financial reliance. but Africa can be self-reliant because we have our own natural resources. Developed countries actually come to exploit us. So it's not that we do not have the necessary finances to do that. So in different countries, say like in DRC, what we are trying to campaign on is for the government to cancel fossil fuel exploration licenses. So if we stop singing the tune of the colonialist, I believe that we can be self-reliant and meet our energy goals, meet our economic development goals.
Ending use of fossil fuels and transiting to renewable energy is the timely way out for African countries, she said.
Africa is being impacted by the increasing amount of fossil exploration. So what is this organization along with its partners doing to address the problem?
My recommendation would be that different governments need to take action to embrace sustainable energy solutions for their countries. So what we are actually doing is trying to campaign not only to just end the era of fossil fuels, but also to have a just transition mechanism for the continent, whereby in as much as we are forcing out fossil fuels, then we can adopt cleaner renewable sources of energy and have a sustainable approach to addressing energy in the country as well as economic prosperity.
Actors on the field believe that development assistance needs to be aligned with climate and country needs. Investment considerations for fossil fuel and green growth initiatives also need to be aligned with sustainable development plans.